What's going on, people? Back again. Another installment of Ancient Egypt presented by Professor Bob Bryan on them audiobooks. You can find this one and other audiobooks from a company known as Great Courses. And I myself have found my Great Courses books on Amazon. Maybe you don't shop on Amazon. Maybe you do. You can pretty much find Great Courses any and everywhere. Audiobooks online, and some I've found can be located at your local library or at your county library. So, with that being said, where did we leave off? Oh my goodness. They talked about Darius. They talked about Xerxes. We learned about the 365-day calendar actually came from Egypt. And there was mention of a love child. That's a lot. It's taking me in so many different directions. All right, Professor. What's on the list for today?
The pharaoh would be the symbol of Egypt. Egypt was pharaoh-centric. The pharaoh's job was to maintain ma'at, divine order.
Yep.
And divine order was with Egypt on the top, ruling the Middle East. And remember that there were three things in Egyptian society that had to stay the same: the role of the pharaoh, the military, and the religion. Egypt had tried to keep this in balance. It was a balance. Three things: priests were wealthy, military was strong, pharaoh assured it all. The military rode out, brought back booty, gave it to the temple, the gods looked upon the military rode out again, and the pharaoh made sure it all worked. Okay? This is the story of Egypt for almost 3,000 years. Remember the intermediate periods? During those intermediate periods, they always went back to a pharaoh. That was the role, that was the government that they had to have. And when people like Nectanebo were fighting to keep Egypt Egyptian, right? He knew these traditions. They were written on temple walls. It's harder for us to read them. But Nectanebo could go into Karnak Temple, walk through there, and see the exploits of Thutmose III. He could see this, he could see that. It was all one to them. This was their tradition. One of the things, and the last thing I'll tell you about Herodotus, our man, because we're now past the time of Herodotus almost. He wasn't around when this happened. One of the things that amazed Herodotus, he said, when I came to Egypt, the priests took me into their temple, and they showed me statues of generations going back and back and back and back of priests. He couldn't believe that you could have such a long history. Couldn't believe it, because the Greeks were newcomers compared to the Egyptians. So it wasn't just isolated pharaohs. They were fighting for a tradition. This was ancient Egypt. And let me take as an example, just one example of how it didn't just happen. It was 3,000 years of development. The Book of the Dead. Because we're not going to see books of the dead now. They're going to really die out. The Book of the Dead, you'll remember, I've mentioned it many times, was the guidebook to the next world. This was going to assure your resurrection in the next world. How did it evolve? Where did the Book of the Dead come from? Well, go back to the Old Kingdom. Go back to the pyramids. And remember, the last king of Dynasty 5, Unas, is the first one to have pyramid texts. He inscribes on the walls of his pyramid, in the burial chamber, the first large body of texts in the history of the world. And they're all magic, and they're all determined to get him to the next world. That's the pyramid texts. Now let's trace them through a few thousand years of history and see what happens to them. And you'll see, Egyptian history is like one piece. Remember what followed the Old Kingdom and the pyramids? First intermediate period. The pyramids are robbed. They're robbed. Now think about this. The pyramids are left open. Tomb robbers break in, take whatever treasures are inside the pyramids, and the pyramids are open. For the first time, the commoner can go inside a pyramid and see what it looked like. There are no guards anymore. This is the first intermediate period. They go inside the pyramids, and what do they see? The pyramid texts. And they read them. They have someone read them to them, perhaps a priest who's still around. And they learn. These spells will guarantee your entry into the next world. They'll get your resurrection. Now everybody wants them. They're not just for the king anymore. Now you've got people wanting resurrection just like the Pharaoh with their spells. But what do? They don't have pyramids to put their texts on. These aren't people wealthy as pharaohs. What do? They write them on their wooden coffins. And we now get, after the first intermediate period, a new development. It looks like a new development, but it's the same old thing twisted around a little bit. It's the coffin texts. Inside wooden coffins of the Middle Kingdom, we get commoners having the pyramid text, basically the same text written inside their coffins. And they're beautiful things. Sometimes they're painted rather elaborately, rather beautifully. And they're just to help them get to the next world. Now, that's the Middle Kingdom. So notice, the coffin texts of the Middle Kingdom are really the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom. But we've not yet to our Book of the Dead. Remember, we're trying to explain why the Book of the Dead is not just something that pops up. It's a development. Eventually, somebody realizes, probably a priest who wants a business for himself. Somebody realizes that we can't fit all the spells inside a coffin. It's just a rectangular box, maybe 6.5 feet by 3 by 2, maybe. What are you going to do? You're missing some crucial spells. Maybe you won't have your legs in the next world. Maybe you'll miss out on your arms. So somebody comes up with the idea. Let's write it on papyrus. Let's write it on papyrus. We can put all 280 spells or whatever on a papyrus, roll it up, and you can put it in your coffin. That's the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead is the development from the pyramid texts to the coffin texts to the Book of the Dead. We're looking at 2,000 years almost.
Oh, wow.
It's a continuous thing. It may be on papyrus, it may be on wood, it may be on stone, but it's really the same thing. When a nobleman of the 19th dynasty or the 20th dynasty had a Book of the Dead placed in his coffin, he is going back to the Old Kingdom and the pharaohs who had pyramid texts. So this is a tradition that the Egyptians were very much aware of. Very much. And this is the tradition that's about to die. Even the tradition of the gods. For 3,000 years, Egyptians worshipped the same gods. And the gods were an integral part of their life. For example, I haven't talked about him, the god Bes. Wonderful god. He is the god of both childbirth and war. Both. Right? Strange? He's shown as a little dwarf.
What?
Sometimes he's banging on his tambourine. Pretty gleeful guy. Sometimes he's got a sword above his head. Right? He's the god of both childbirth and war. Now women would have amulets of Bes for a good childbirth. Integral part. By the way, Bes is unusual. A little side trip. Bes is unusual. If you look at the carvings of gods on temple walls, you will notice that virtually every Egyptian god is shown in profile. You never get to look at a god full face, head on. He's never staring right at you. There are only 2 deities in ancient Egypt that you'll ever see looking straight at you. One is my man Bes, the little god of childbirth and warfare. Some people think that this suggests that he was a foreign god. He's a strange-looking guy. You know, he has a tail like a lion. He has a mane like a lion. But he stands up on 2 feet like he's a little dwarf. He's a dwarf. It's a combination of dwarf and lion. Right? But Bes was an integral part. Women would wear. I should tell you the second one. I know I said there are two that are full face. I'll tell you the other one. It's Hathor.
Hathor.
Goddess of love. Music. She is shown the face of a beautiful woman with the ears of a cow.
I knew it.
She nurtures. She gives milk. She suckles. And sometimes if you look on the top of her head, you will see a little rectangular temple-like structure. It's really a sistrum, a musical instrument, a rattle-like thing, which was a sacred musical instrument that priestesses of Hathor would rattle in the temples. Right? Now, Bes, god of childbirth, there were, of course, thousands of gods in ancient Egypt. Right? Bes wasn't even the only god of childbirth. Think about Taweret, another one of my favorites. She's a pregnant hippopotamus. She's standing up, she's got a big belly, and Egyptian women would love amulets of Taweret to protect them when they gave birth. But
Terry, I couldn't remember the name, but when he said a hippopotamus, I remember when Marvel did the Moon Knight series on Disney Plus. Instead of them using Anubis, they used the hippopotamus to be the judge. I didn't understand why. The hippopotamus? What god is this? But yeah, I remember hearing about that from Marvel. They like to change a lot of stuff. But anyway.
The point I want to make about these gods is that Egypt worshipped the same gods for thousands of years. Thousands. Osiris and Isis, they were all worshipped. All part of their daily life. And who were the ones who made sure that the gods were worshipped? The priests. The largest bureaucracy in the history of the world. And this is something that is going to die in Egypt with the death of Nectanebo II, the last native ruler. Because priests don't contribute to the economy. They take it. They don't create goods. They don't go out to war. And when you get foreigners coming in who are going to control your country, they want it to be an efficient company. They want to get all they can out of it. What we are going to see in the next 4 or 5 lectures are Greeks ruling Egypt like a business. Take all the money you can out of it. And if you're going to really rule Egypt like a business, you're not going to support the priests. And when you don't support the priests, you're going to lose something else. Not just the gods, no. You're going to lose the language. You're going to lose the Egyptian language because the priesthood was always the literate class. So when we have the last native ruler fleeing Egypt, we are going to have the beginning of the end of the Egyptian language. Egypt for 300 years is going to be ruled by Greeks. None of whom, virtually none of whom, speak Egyptian. Greek will become the language of Egypt if you want to do business. And the priesthood is going to die out. Till eventually, the sacred Egyptian language, the hieroglyphs, will become a dead language. There's only one exception of the Greeks ruling Egypt. Cleopatra will learn the language. Cleopatra. But she's still 300 years off.
Damn.
Where we're going to have to start next time is with the beginning of the Greek period, with Alexander the Great. And we'll do that next time.
Finally, he's going to explain Alexander. I knew he had a reason for not mentioning Alexander before. I just didn't know what the reason was. Well, That was dynasties 21 through 20. My Roman numeral language is kind of rusty. I don't really use it that much. But anyway, dynasties 21, 22, 23 was such a debacle. He just breezed through that real quick. Well, the 25th dynasty, love it. 2 Nubian kings come into town, take back Egypt. I mean, why not? Nubia and Egypt been doing business almost since the very beginning. They got like a love-hate relationship. Like 2 brothers. That's my brother. We're going to fight. We're going to have our disagreements. But let somebody tell me he in trouble, I'm there. I know he can hold his own, but sometimes you need some help. And that's what Nubia was. Nubia was the brother doing his own thing, but then he heard that his brother in trouble, so he's like, yo, we got to go help. So, yeah, I'm liking the 25th century, the 25th dynasty. Now, it gets kind of rocky after that. I mean, some tried. The one guy, he fought against a foreign invader and lost. And then later on, his son won a couple of battles, but they didn't win the war. They won battles, but they didn't win the war. So the language was constantly changing with every nation that took over Egypt. And now you're going to have more Greek speaking people in Egypt. So things about to change real quick. And with that, my people, stay safe, and I will talk to you later.